Hi guys, Aaron here, back for another Body Club workout. Today we're going to be doing a barbell complex. So this is part one, where we'll learn some key exercises that are excellent for strengthening both your upper and lower body. We'll be focusing on practicing the exercises and perfecting the technique. So when it comes to part two, you'll be ready to smash the killer complex that I've put together. If you're already experienced at lifting a barbell, if you've had some previous coaching, then feel free to head over to part two now and get cracking with the workout. So let's go ahead and get started with some of the fundamentals here. So we've got 8 exercises. We've got front squats, overhead press. We've got split squats on the left, split squats on the right. We've got bent over row, glute bridge, a narrow floor press, and also RDLs. Okay, so these are key movements that you'll sort of see in the gym. You can also do these exercises at home with dumbbells if you don't have access to a barbell as well. Okay, so we're going to start nice and simple with an exercise called front squats. Okay, I'm going to talk you through here each exercise. I'm going to explain the technique. It's an opportunity for you to practice the exercises, and as I say, if you've already had that practice, then please head over to part two where you can go into the full workout. So we're going to start, as I say, with front squats. So we're going to rack the bar up to your shoulders, and the bar's sitting in front. So the bar comes up onto your shoulders here. I'm just going to turn to the side so you can see. It's very important when you're doing front squats that you're getting your elbows to rotate forward and up. So the bar is actually resting onto my shoulders. I'm not having to strain and hold the bar in front of me. That's different at military press. So we should just be pretty comfortable here. The difference is if I had a lot of weight, I could just hold it here for a prolonged period. Okay, if I was having to hold the weight in my arms, it would be a lot harder, it would be a lot more stress. Okay, then from here, driving the elbows forwards and upwards helps keep my torso upright when I go into my squat. I'm going to plant my feet about shoulder width, sometimes a bit narrower or wider depending on what you feel is comfortable. We have to work through a few reps to get comfortable with it. And then I'm going to push my knees out. I'm going to sit my hips down. My weight is spread quite evenly through my feet. So as I come down, I actually almost want to sit backwards with my hips, okay? You definitely don't want the heels to be lifting off the floor. The heels need to stay in contact with the floor, okay? So elbows forward and up, hips back and down, knees push out, drive through the heels. And just one more thing really to think about from there, if I show you from side on, is that you don't really want to be tucking under with the hips. This is called a butt wink. So we don't really want the hips to be tucking under this way, okay, because that will actually stress the lower back. We want to be pushing the tailbone back, keeping the chest up, so that we can keep what's called a nice neutral position through the lower back, okay? So that is your front squat, okay? So give yourself the opportunity to have a little bit of practice of that exercise, and then we'll move on to the second exercise, which is an overhead press. The overhead press starts in the same position that the front squat starts and finishes in as well. The barbell again comes to the shoulders, and we're going to press up overhead. Really important, if you're pressing overhead, make sure you do a good warm-up for your shoulders. All right, some good shoulder mobility drills will help the function of the shoulder. All right, and it's also important if you're pressing overhead that you've got full range of motion through that shoulder joint. Okay, 180 degrees there of motion. If you feel that you can't get up here and your arms are out in front of you, all right, then definitely need to work on a little bit of mobility through the shoulders to perform this exercise. So we're going to again lift the barbell up to the shoulders. If you've got a squat rack, you can always just pull it straight off a squat rack. Okay, you don't have to clean it off the floor. From here, Again, I sit in that position where it's comfortable on my shoulders. Slightly different from a military press. And then from here, just pushing up. We're going to do strict press. Straight up. Strict press is without bending through the knees, okay? So we've got a push press as well, which is where I'm going to dip through the legs. But for now, I'm keeping it strict, primarily focused on strengthening the shoulders and the arms, pushing through. Keep the bar close on the way down to your nose, almost like it would brush your nose. You don't want it so close that you hit your nose on the way up, end up with a nosebleed. Done it myself. So you're just going to press and back, keeping it close, making sure that bar is pressed right up over the shoulders. You should be able to hold the bar there comfortably. All right. You don't want to be in a position where the hips are forwards. I'm not going to do it, but you don't want the hips forwards and the bar forwards. Otherwise, you can end up stressing your lower back. Okay. And as you can see, I can sort of push my shoulders, push my knuckles up through the ceiling, and hold into that position for a sort of prolonged period. So it should feel relatively stable there. And then back down and release. Okay, so that's your overhead press. From there, we're going to move into a split squats. So split squats again, the bar this time comes onto your shoulders. Again, if you've got a squat rack, you can take the bar off the squat rack. Okay, hands holding over the bar, quite close to your shoulders. The elbows, you want to bring the elbows downward a little bit, and you actually want to pull consciously down on the bar. Okay, and it's very important when you're racking the bar onto your shoulders, not to rack it onto the neck. Okay, you don't want to rack it onto those spinal processes, not onto the bones of the spinal processes, but actually just load it onto your upper traps on your shoulders. So just trying to find the most comfortable point on your shoulders, definitely down below your neck. Okay, then we're going to take a split stance from here. Okay, notice both feet facing forward, hip width apart for stability, and then I'm going to bend into both knees. Okay, that front foot stays well planted. You don't want to go and lift the heel off the floor. Keep your heel driving into the floor. If your knee goes over the toes a little bit, not too much of a problem, but we just don't want to be moving forwards really with the bar. It wants to be moving pretty much down and up. Maybe a little bit forwards, but not too far. Keep that head up as well. That will help keep your chest up. And then we'll change to a few of those on the other side. Split your stance. Both feet facing forward. Rear heel off the floor. Chest up, pulling down on the bar. Sinking into it, bending both knees. Little bit more weight in the front leg there than in the back leg. Okay, and release. Walk it back into the rack, or you can push press it back off your shoulders. Okay, as I say, this bar is about 15 kilos, and then I've got 2 5 plates, that's about 25 kilos. Work with something that you're comfortable with. Practice with a lighter weight. When you start to get comfortable with the lighter weight, start to build. Okay? All right, then we're going through a bent over row. Bent over row is important to get your set position right. The feet face forwards, sort of a hip to shoulder width. I like to go shoulder width. From there, you're just going to push your hips back into this position. There's a slight bend in my knees, but my knees are sitting on top of my ankles. My shins are pretty much vertical. You might find they come forward a little bit, that's okay. But again, we don't want too much weight over the toes. We want to sit the hips back, stretch through the hamstrings, flare the hips out, keeping this nice and neutral. When you're doing bent over rows, guys, it's really important not to round off your back, okay? We need to lengthen out the spine, tighten through the abdominals, and then we're ready to go into our row, okay? So we'll go ahead and practice. Back straight before you lift it off the floor. Shins pretty much vertical, chest forwards, tight through your back muscles. You can actually come all the way to the top. You can set yourself, and then we'll go into a few rows. I've got an overhand grip, a bit wider than my shoulders there, okay? Through, back straight. Squeeze the shoulder blades, driving the elbows back. I'm trying not to pull it up, hunch the shoulders. Trying to keep my back straight. Feels like I'm pulling it backwards, okay? And down. Good stuff. You might feel that in the lower back. If your back's straight, if you're neutral, that's okay. And you're just contracting your abdominals to help to stabilize it, all right? I'm going to work through a glutes bridge off the floor, okay? Now, if you've got plates on your barbell like mine, you'll be able to slide it up over your thighs. You might see people doing this off a bench, off a box, or off a chair. But we're going to do this one on the floor. If you have just a bar, if you don't have big plates like this, that's not a problem. You just pull the bar over onto your hips. Lie down onto the back. My feet, again, shoulder width apart. The knees also the same width. Rest the bar into your hip crease. All right, you don't want it up too high onto your abdomen. Bar stays on your hip crease. All right, you can get a pad for the bar, or you could lay a towel underneath the bar if it is digging into your hips. Usually it's just about a bit of practice and you find a comfortable point that you can lift off of. For here today, we'll place the bar, holding it there with the hands, and then we're going to tuck the hips under, squeeze through the glutes, and push the hips up nice and high. Probably putting a bit more pressure through the heels opposed to the toes, all right? Push through, exhale. Keep the shoulders pushing back and down. You want a full drive. You might find that you feel like you're going high, but you're only kind of coming halfway up. You want to really squeeze through your full range of motion. Helps to have good range of motion through your hip flexors and your quads with this exercise. So if you're struggling with range, then you might want to do a few mobility drills to start to open out through your hip flexors. Okay, and release. So plenty of chance there to practice that exercise, pressing back and down. Just one more little coaching cue that's going to be useful for you is as you're pushing the bar up, tucking the hips and pushing the hips high. But what we want to do here really is keep the ribs heavy. So if I feel like I've got a weight on my chest, pushing my ribs down, all right, and then tuck my hips under and push my hips up, I feel much more activation through the glutes and the top of the hamstrings. All right, you might find with this exercise, you can overwork the lower back. You can press the hips up and end up arching your back like that, using your lower back to do it. So keep the ribs heavy and lengthen that tailbone under to drive the hips through a nice full extension, okay? We've got two more to go. We're going to do a floor press, and we're going to do this one narrow. So we're going to target a little bit more anterior deltoids and triceps here. So we're going to imagine that the elbows are brushing down through the side of the body. Press the shoulders back and down into the floor. A little bit of pressure through the feet as well, okay? So going into our floor press. From here, I'm going to bring the bar over my chest. Now, you could always use a bench, and you can use a bench press. It's a little bit easier to rack the bar off of a bench press because we bring it off of the rack over the chest. Now the wrists and the knuckles are pretty much flush, and then from here we're going to brush those elbows down the side of the body. All right, so I'm not pressing it over my neck and my elbows aren't out. Okay, we want to make sure that the elbows are tucked in, the bar lines up over your chest, and then the forearms are vertical. And then it's nice and simple, we just push up over the chest. Okay. Push the shoulders back and down to get the lats active. The lats support you for the pecs and the triceps and the shoulders to create a push. Okay, it's your chest press from there, and then finally we're going to do RDLs as our last exercise. All right, which is a hinging through the hips. Okay, should be pretty much familiar with this if you're doing any barbell work, familiar with hinging through the hips. But if you're not, it's always and also good to go back over the technique of these things anyway. Okay, so bar comes to the shins, the hips push back. That same position, do you recognize it? Where we did the bent over row. Okay, it's the same position here, lengthening out, tight through the upper back, pull. Okay, from here, there's a slight bend in the knees, the hips push back, the tailbone reaches behind you, and the shoulder blades retract. So I feel like I'm actually pulling the bar onto my thighs and then onto my shins, keeping contact pretty much all the time. It looks like I'm leaning forward, but actually I'm not really leaning forward here. All right, all I'm doing is sitting my hips back. So the path of the bar, although it does move a bit, it's relatively vertical. Okay, when you get to the top, very important not to leave your bottom sticking out in this position. Don't want to be arched through the back, so we're going to take that tailbone, lengthen it under, make sure the glutes are supporting us, take the shoulder blades, retract them back, so we've got good posture as well through there. Okay, breathing in, out at the top. Try not to stress the neck, just keep the head and the neck in line, nice and simple, maybe even a slight chin tuck. Just a tiny bend through the knees, and then up. Okay, so very useful to practice your technique. You can revisit this video as many times as you like. It's a great way, as you feel now, you're quite warmed up, your body's quite warmed up and prepped to go through the workout. So we're going to do part 2 next, and we're going to smash out a barbell complex. Thanks guys, see you in part 2.